Hello, wonderful souls, and welcome back to another enlightening episode of Dose of Inspirational Light. Today, we have a special guest with us and a privilege and honor to have him, a spiritual guide whose journey spans over 4 decades, influencing lives across continents. Please let me introduce you to Charlie Hogg, the director of Brahma Kumaris in Australia, a seasoned traveler and a devoted teacher of meditation. Charlie's profound commitment to the spiritual path has taken him to an incredible adventure, sharing his wisdom in more than 80 countries, as a speaker at international conferences and Brahma Kumaris public programs. Charlie embarked on his spiritual odyssey over 40 years ago, discovering the transformative power of meditation with the Brahma Kumaris in London back in 1975. Wow. This pivotal moment ignited a lifelong dedication to spiritual exploration. From his roots in Melbourne to traversing the landscapes of Asia, Middle East, and Europe, Charlie lived amongst diverse communities, embracing the philosophies of Buddhism, Christianity, Sikhism, Islam, Hinduism, and Taoism. In 1977, he established a Brahma Kumari Centre in Collingwood, Melbourne. And in 1980, he assumed the role of the national coordinator for the Brahma Kumaris Australia after relocating to Sydney. Today, Charlie serves as the director of Brahma Kumaris Asia Pacific, imparting the transformative practice of meditation that he has mastered over the years. His extensive experience and deep spiritual insights make him a sought-after meditation teacher, speaker, and retreat leader globally. So, a long introduction, but it's much needed because it's an amazing honor to have him here. So without further ado, let's dive into the inspirational journey and teachings of remarkable Charlie Hogg. Brother Charlie, Om Shanti.
Thank you, Shikha. Lovely to be here.
It's a great honor. Firstly, I just said Om Shanti as my first greeting. Why do Brahma Kumari say Om Shanti?
Om Shanti, really literally translated, is I am a peaceful being. And it's a lovely way to connect with others. You know, sometimes when we interact with others, we see their body and we come to a whole lot of conclusions and comparisons. And yet when I say I am a peaceful soul, it's like I'm coming from my authentic self and I'm respecting you as your authentic self too.
Lovely, that's very beautiful. So let's start with, I'm going to call you Charlie for the purposes of the podcast, but I know it's Brother Charlie. Is that okay?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so Charlie, who are you truly? If I could just ask that.
You know, on the spiritual journey, the spiritual journey is this extraordinary internal exploration to know and experience who I am. And in all my years as a meditator, I've been exploring the reality that I'm something much more than a temporary physical form. I'm a spiritual being. And it's really interesting, Shikha, because 80% of people living in this country and most parts of the world believe there's something more than this physical body. But we don't really know what it is or how to connect or experience it. And in a way, the spiritual journey is very much that understanding that I am a spiritual being and how to really connect with my authentic self. And so I would say that, you know, I am a soul, but I, the soul, wear the body that's called Charlie. And so I express myself through my life through this body. But I know that I'm something different, and when this body finishes, the body called Charlie, the soul is going to continue or fly on.
Wow, that's pretty deep to start off with already. Well, I'll ask you a little bit more questions on what a soul is, but let's a little bit more on you first. What initially sparked your interest in spirituality, and how old were you?
You know, I think most of my life I was interested in the deeper things of life, the inner things of life. I think since a teenager. My nickname at school was Swami. My friends called me Swami.
Oh, wow. Really?
Because I like to sort of delve into these sorts of things. And I think in my teenage years, you see a lot of injustice in the world. So I spent a lot of my time on the streets demonstrating against Australia's involvement in the Vietnam War, against apartheid, against so many things.
Wow.
But I had an experience, actually. I was in Canberra. I was 17, and we had a university festival. And we went on a march against the Vietnam War, and I was arrested. And I was put in jail. And in jail that night, there was 200 young people who were the leaders of the sort of peace movement in Australia. And for a little while, it was the 1970s, we were singing John Lennon songs, things like that. But as things cooled down, people began to talk. And I realized that we were such an angry, negative, peaceless group of people. And we were the so-called leaders of the peace movement. And it dawned on me so deeply, there will never be peace in this world until I experience peace. And in a way, that really deeply kick-started a spiritual journey, that the world will not change unless we change. The world will not change unless I change myself. And this is what's happening in the world at the moment. Everyone's saying, we want peace, we want peace. But in our homes, in our relationships, we're extremely peaceless. And we give peacelessness to other people too.
Before I continue, how was that experience in jail?
Interesting. I remember I rang my father. I was 17, right?
Yes.
And I said, hi, Dad. And he said, hi. He called me Chess. That's what the family called. Hi, Chess. How you doing? Having a good time? Where are you? And there was a long silence. I said, Dad, I'm in jail. And there was another long silence at his end.
Too bad. It's a good thing that the police didn't say you've got 1 minute to get off the phone. Okay. So did you get bail and got released the next day? And everything.
No, it was just the next day,
Yes.
And those days it was very cheap. It was only $50. So it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it was quite a shift in my journey.
Yes.
Realizing that, you can protest and react to so many things externally, but unless we change, which is at the heart of the spiritual journey, the world doesn't change, society doesn't change, human nature doesn't change.
Yeah, it's amazing that you thought of something and you've decided to take action, and here we are 40 years later, going to delve into that journey. Wow. Okay, so you were studying architecture, were you, at that time when you did that protest in Melbourne?
Yeah.
Did you ever finish that degree?
No. I think my spiritual yearning was quite strong at that time. Or put it this way, I just couldn't see myself as sitting around designing buildings and things like that. There seemed to be something much more important I had to find out.
Yes.
It seemed like I had to learn about something much deeper than that. I mean, I enjoyed the course while I was at it, but something deeper was pulling me at that time.
And your parents were okay with you leaving the degree and leaving your studies to pursue a path that back in those days probably not so known?
Well, my parents were incredibly understanding people. And, I was young at that time, and I think when you're young, you can be a bit headstrong. And they knew that it was something I wanted to do. And I think we all thought that I would just, even me, go overseas for a year or so, like a gap year, and then return. But as I travelled, things even went deeper and deeper.
Wow, okay. How many siblings are you?
I have a brother, an older brother, and a sister.
So you're the youngest?
No, I'm the middle.
Middle child. Okay. Where did you travel first? You tell me.
It was in the days where you could literally travel overland from Australia almost to Europe, almost. I mean, you have to... So I flew to Southeast Asia, and I went right through Southeast Asia. I went into Myanmar. In those days it was Burma, India, Nepal. And then I went overland through Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Turkey.
Wow.
And then I went into Eastern Europe and then up to London. I lived in London. But actually, without a conscious choice, I always ended up living in religious communities. So I lived in a Gurudwara with the Sikhs for a while. I lived in a Buddhist monastery off an island, on an island off Thailand, going around begging for food with the monks and things like that.
Really?
And I lived with a Muslim community during Ramadan. I went to the Ganges, dipped my toes. I went to where the Dalai Lama lives in North India. I went and lived with a yogi in the Himalayas a little bit. And I spent time visiting a lot of mosques in Afghanistan and Turkey and so on. And I also lived in a Christian monastery in Belgium for a little while. And then when I got to the UK, I was working, but I was still going to so many sort of spiritual communities. I sort of thought that London in those days was like a spiritual supermarket. Everything was available, so I used to go to so many talks and things. So I was very open to all types of sort of belief systems. I was just fascinated by the inner journey and, how to learn about myself.
Yes. The whole journey took you 1 year before you reached UK?
It did. Maybe even a bit longer than that, yes.
And how did you fund for this journey?
When I left university, I worked, I can't remember, maybe for 6 months. And my memory was that the whole journey cost me $1,500 for 1 year from Australia. Because in those days, I can remember in a lot of parts of India, it was I had bed and breakfast for 1 rupee.
Wow.
This is the early 70s,
Yes.
And in a lot of those Southeast Asian countries, the Middle East was totally cheap.
Yes.
I can remember even I went when I arrived in Myanmar, I cashed $10 and I had so many notes, I couldn't fit them in my pockets, so the $10 was wads of notes and things.
Oh, wow.
It's a very different world than the
yes.
world we live in now.
Were you scared that you'll be mugged with all that tons of cash every
No, I wasn't. And it was safe. It
Yes.
was safe. A lot of people these days would never do that trip.
No.
I mean, not totally safe. Going through Afghanistan was the time when there was the Russian occupation at the time, and there'd been a lot of upheaval. But I often used to say I felt I had a guardian angel looking after me, because I was only 20.
Yes.
And it was like a huge adventure.
Yes.
But I often see that as my real education, especially living in religious communities and really trying to understand the thinking and beliefs of all different types of spiritual traditions.
Yes. Did you work casually to save up that $1,500?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Or
did.
was it Dad that?
No, I worked.
You
I
worked. Worked casually. Yeah. Awesome. Back in the 1970s, or this is probably late 60s, when you were protesting, before you traveled, you said they called you Swami. I didn't even know the word Swami was a thing in Australia back in those days. But is it because you were also wearing Swami-like clothes, or did you have a beard?
It was 1970, so I had long hair.
Ah, you did
Not
have
quite
long
as
hair.
long
I
as
thought
yours.
so.
Not quite as long as yours, but I think there was a huge sort of transformation happening amongst young people, and like the Beatles, that was like, it wasn't just music; it was like a whole new culture, and they went to India to meditate and so on. So it was very common, and I think we grew up, and it was extremely fashionable, I would even say, in the early 70s and the late 60s to, connect with the spirituality of Asia. Yeah, young people were very into it. When I grew up in Melbourne, you could get cheap airfares to Asia. They were just a few $100s.
Right.
So all of us at Christmas time, and everyone would just go to Asia and
Go to
spend
Asia.
their time. So you find most people of my age had been to most parts of Asia at that time as students.
Nice, very nice. It's good. It's good because that's one global world.
It is.
Definitely.
And you learn a lot. You learn a lot when you live with people of different cultures. And I really love it. I love multiculturalism and, that respect for difference. which I think is at the heart of spirituality too.
So before you reached UK, what was your favorite country that you had been to that you could pinpoint, and why?
Well, I have had the fortune to travel a lot in my life. I appreciate absolutely everywhere. Probably India and Nepal were the places I enjoyed most. I went on a trek with no equipment right up into Nepal.
Oh, wow.
But Nepal was really beautiful too.
Yes.
But Greece was really fascinating as well, because the more you stay, I lived on the islands in Greece, and at that time there was a war between Turkey and Greece. And to get out to the islands, you go in boats, of course.
Yes.
So all the boats were taken to take troops to where they were fighting. So we were stranded on the island. I was there for some months, but they're absolutely beautiful. And the Greek culture too has an incredible history, probably often the seed of Western civilization in a sense. So I found it really fascinating living there. And I really am interested in all cultures, I would say.
Yes.
But when I reached India, I felt very familiar with India.
Right.
And my father worked for my grandfather's company when I was there. My grandfather had a textile company in Melbourne. It was quite a big company.
Okay.
And so every year my grandfather, my father, uncle would travel to India. My father knows India backwards because they bought raw materials.
Yeah.
So he was there a month or two every year for as long as I could remember. So there was quite a strong connection as well.
Did you have your dad's contacts when you went to India?
I did.
Ah, yes, that made it a little bit easier, I presume.
Yes, but I managed fine, Yeah.
Okay.
People were very friendly.
Yeah. Was your dad or mum calling you to say? We didn't have mobile phones in those days, but...
They didn't.
No?
And honestly, to ring internationally in those days was, very expensive. So letter writing was the thing.
Letter writing.
So
by the time it got there, you would be in another country.
It was a little bit like that. Yeah.
Yes, nice. Very nice. Okay, so let's talk about spirituality, because that's what you travel to find. How would you define spirituality in simpler terms for those that don't know?
I think spirituality in just a few questions can be defined. Who am I? Who do I belong to? And what is my purpose in life? And in a way, I think spirituality is the quest of going deeper and deeper into these questions, moving from sort of an intellectual or theoretical belief to an experience or a feeling inside. And so spirituality is this real journey of inner exploration to really understand and experience who I am and explore the one relationship that's permanent in life, the relationship with the divine or God. Then on the basis of those two things, really, what is my true purpose in life? Is life just to accumulate wealth, have a few kids and do that? Or is there a much deeper purpose in life for which I have come here? Because I find that, when you have a really clear purpose in life, you always feel motivated to fulfill that purpose.
Did you find out what your purpose was?
Absolutely, yeah, I really did.
Okay.
And I think the more that you start to experience who you are and taste a quality of peace that you've never had before, almost automatically, without imposing or forcing in any way, you want to offer that to other people.
Okay, we'll delve into those questions as well. Probably are very strong questions up front, but were you searching for God? Because you mentioned the word divine. Were you searching for God during your travels and spiritual exploration? And what did you learn about the other religions that you did explore?
I wasn't searching for God because when I was 12 years old, my parents sent me to confirmation classes, which is sort of like a formal entry into the church. Now, Mum and Dad weren't religious at all, and they never went to church. But, send the kids along there. So I went along every Sunday for a few months, and one day over the dinner table they said, well, what have you learnt?
Yeah.
And I announced as a very educated 12-year-old, I think I'm an atheist. Because quite frankly, I could not relate to the God that they were talking about, because the God that they were talking about was very sort of judgmental and punishing and authoritarian sort of personality, which I couldn't relate to. And yet, you know, as I was traveling, I would say I became an agnostic. I'm not sure, but I'm open. And, you know, and I learned so much from all the traditions. And that's something which is important for me, that, you know, everyone belongs somewhere, and each faith tradition has a lot of value. But I think when we lose our spirituality and just remain religious, that's when I think I'm right and you're wrong. Because when there's true spirituality in any tradition, you know what you need, but you respect what others need in their life too. Yes. And unfortunately, we can see our world at the moment. Once I was in Mumbai and I met a professor of philosophy who told me that he had studied all the wars in history, and 78% of wars were begun by religions. And when you really look at what is religion about, it's about love and compassion and respect and peace. And yet often, because we lose the essential spirituality of our religion, the ego of I'm my way, my truth, and my truth is better than your truth. And unfortunately, that's our world in which we live.
Yes. Yes, we have to delve into that as well, of why it's happening. But let's move on. So before you came to the Brahma Kumari, what else did you experience from a spiritual perspective? Because you said you lived in Gurdwara. Did you meet the Dalai Lama? Or
I've met him.
Ah, you did, but not.
Not then,
Not
but
then,
I
but
met
later.
him.
Nice.
I met him in Melbourne once at before he was the Nobel Peace Prize winner. And I was with a small group of people, maybe 10 or 12. And the Dalai Lama had just been to the headquarters of the Brahma Kumaris in India. He visited once, probably in the 1980s, I think. And he came in the room and we were sitting around in a semicircle, and he came round, looked at everyone, then he came back to me and he said, Om Shanti.
Oh, nice.
He was a very jolly, friendly, lovely. He really radiates cheerfulness. He was really lovely.
Yes.
You know, I think I learned a lot from all of them, but what I did observe was that it was more a habit than an experience, and that the real thing was faith and belief. And for me, as I was traveling, my whole thing became, how do you convert what you know into what you feel? How do you create an inner experience in the laboratory of your mind? How do you feel something, not just have faith? Because, you know, faith gives a certain amount of inner strength, but actually real spirituality delves into the treasures of spiritual feelings and experiences inside. So my quest really became, how do you move from knowing and believing into experiencing and feeling spirituality? To me, that's the difference between religion, is more knowing and believing. Spirituality is more experiencing.
They also say that, you know, science is about proof, but spirituality, as you rightly said, about experiencing. Because people always say, where's the proof? And the proof is in the experience.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so let's go into your leadership, and then we'll dive into the deeper topics. Today you're the director of Brahma Kumaris, and you look after the full Asia Pacific. So if I could ask, what kind of a leader do you think you are?
I don't know really what's the best answer to that question, but what I would say, what I've learned here, is leadership is all about self-leadership. And, you know, often people have incredible degrees in, you know, a master's in management and so many things like that, and skills to manage the external world. But the leaders who are loved and respected are ones who have self-leadership. look at the Mahatma Gandhis, the Nelson Mandelas, and these sorts of people, because they had an incredible discipline. So to me, I would only evaluate my sense of leadership by how much I can lead myself. And that's been one of my fascinations, because what I observed when I first began was that how my mind was leading me, not me leading my mind. And so it's like if someone says something, let's say criticism, and I let it through my ears, and it drives my thinking. So it's like my ears are controlling my thinking. I see a bad behavior, I let it in my eyes, and it drives my thinking. So it's like my sense organs are mastering me. I'm a slave in my inner world. And as I've really practiced to meditate, you learn to observe rather than absorb what's happening around you, so that you still see the behavior, you still hear the things, but you still remain in your sense of self-respect and your sense of self-value. And of course it's a journey. To me, that's really what leadership is about. And I find it's almost an automatic thing that if you have a sense of self-mastery over your thoughts and your emotions, almost automatically people will respect such a person who's in that, has a sense of self-control. They trust them because they're stable. It's not that you're not sure which mood they're going to be in this day or which mood that day in that sense. So leadership is all about leading the self, really.
Leading yourself.
That's
so you
the
mean
main qualification.
staying stable here no matter what.
Absolutely.
That's what you mean by self-leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. That sounds good. So, I've been in corporate all my life, and I've met many great leaders as well from a corporate perspective. I've also led a team, and I found, that I was always in the loop between the targets and the KPIs that the organization. Leading a team was much harder for me than to go to an organization and sell them $1 million worth of whatever I was selling. So I'd like to understand your perspective on how do you remain calm, manage personalities that are different, very, very different from yours?
Yeah. I would say that all leaders find dealing with others the biggest challenge. What I've seen is the greatest influence is my attitude. And, when you communicate, in a sense, leadership is communication, isn't it? And when you communicate, there's 3 types of communication. What you say, your face. People read a lot from your face, and your vibes, your feelings, etc. Those 2 non-verbal ones, which is your face and your vibrations, have 80 to 90% of the impact of communication. So I found that when you hold the value of someone in your attitude, when you know their goodness, everyone has weaknesses and shortcomings. But I find that if a leader holds the value of those they're responsible for in their attitude, people feel that sense of belonging, that sense of respect, and I find almost all people will really cooperate because they feel needed and they feel valued and they feel respected.
Yes.
I saw some data once that most people in the corporate world, what's more important than their wage packet is to be valued and respected.
Yeah.
And the thing is that when I lack self-respect, I start to see all the defects of the people in my team. They feel it, so they don't like me too. They're reacting to me. And it just shows everything is subtle. And this is why when you meditate, what are you doing? You're upgrading the quality of your thinking and feeling. And that's just sort of the vibrations and the energy that people feel from you. And I'm sure, how you meet somebody and almost instantly you feel comfortable, or you can feel a bit edgy. Because we sort of step into their thought aura, and you actually feel influenced by their quality of their thoughts. So I really do pay a lot of attention to my attitude. And if I feel my attitude moving over and sort of dwelling on someone's weakness or shortcoming, I really try to change it, because there's a beautiful law in a way if you give love and respect to people, you win blessings from their heart. And that's like an energy that really empowers you, as a leader. And there was a sister who ran the Brahma Kumaris for 38 years, Dadi Prakashmani. She was incredibly loving. She respected everyone. She was absolutely relentless. She gave regard to those who loved her, those who didn't. And she just got she often used to say the blessings, when you meet somebody and their face smiles, love, and their eyes just radiate those feelings. Yes. They are an incredible power in life. You can't imagine, to give you sort of, take you beyond your tiredness and your challenges, etc.
Yes.
So I think I pay a lot of attention to my subtle attitude.
So if there is somebody out there listening, and I know there are a few corporate people in this group that will be listening, for those that haven't yet started meditation, and I know we're going to come to them, motivating them to start it, but beyond that, how do you fake it at the start before it becomes a natural thing?
Fake? You mean fake?
You know how people say fake it till you make it? So just at the start, because our mind is controlling us, majority of us, for those experienced people like yourself who've mastered that. But right now we haven't, the normal people who haven't meditated haven't mastered this. So how do we control that mind so that we divert away from those weaknesses of the team to then focus on only the positive? So when that thought comes, what do we need to say to ourselves to...
This is the spiritual journey, actually. And the first law of spirituality says, I am responsible for how I feel. So you begin to observe your thoughts, and when your thoughts cross the line, you don't overreact to yourself, you don't put yourself down, but you just tweak them to change your attitude and really consciously. I've worked in teams where I literally get out my notebook and write down the good points of everyone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that if the mind deviates to the old habits, the ego habits of always finding fault in other people, to me that's probably the best measure of ego, is how my attitude, how much I'm seeing, looking down at people, criticizing people, finding fault. And it's paying attention.
Yes.
But it's actually really an enjoyable journey of change.
Yes.
And knowing where I want to go, and when I don't go there, which happens to all of us sometimes, don't overreact to myself.
Yes.
Don't feel I can't get there. But in time, I'm just increasing the quality of my thoughts, my feelings, my attitude, and therefore my performance in the workplace too.
That's very beautiful, keeping a record of good points about people.
Yeah.
Also, just the smallest little details matter as well, because what I learned from an ex-boss of mine is, and what he would do is on Outlook, because we all had Outlook, before he would call somebody, whether it was a team member or a client, make a conscious effort to write down the names of their children, to write down just certain things, personal things that that person may have shared. And before he'd make that call or before he'd have that meeting, he'd quickly glance over those notes. And then he'll say, oh, how is? And then the names of the children. And that would make that other person feel really special. So it's a very beautiful thing that I'm trying to, also do. But good qualities about others is also good.
And Shikara, I think kindness never goes astray.
Yes.
I think it's one of the most beautiful human qualities, just to be kind to people. Because underneath our smiles and facades, life is a struggle for most people today. It's hard work.
Yes.
And sometimes even we mask that people are suffering deeply internally.
Yes.
And can't come out of this sort of space of feeling stuck, feeling unhappy, disliking the self, and therefore my performance in work is not so good, I'm not so sweet with the family, and we're stuck in this cycle of unhappiness in a way. And sometimes just a little bit of kindness, and it doesn't even have to be words even, it's once again it's vibrations and feelings, through your eyes. When you're self-aware, you can transmit feelings to people, To me, the great power is love, and even in the corporate world, they don't often talk about it,
Yes.
But it's why often, sometimes I think in that contemporary world, men and women are loving, but sometimes if there's a woman who's a motherly type of person,
Yes.
often they're the best leaders in this world at the moment.
Nurturing kind.
Nurturing, yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of leaders, and we alluded to this before, you had met the Dalai Lama and you probably met many other leaders. Any particular leader that you've met that resonated with you? And you could elaborate.
Once I was in New York and I was with a little film crew actually, and we were making a film called Women in Leadership about the leadership of the Brahma Kumaris. And I interviewed the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations for Political Affairs,
Oh, wow.
Dr. James Jonas. So he was representing the Secretary General, dealing with all the heads of state and stuff. And actually, I asked him, who's the most special leader that you've ever met? And he said, Dadi Prakashmani.
Oh, really?
Who's the head of the Brahma Kumaris. And why I'm saying that is it's the same for me too. Because whatever she said she was, her thoughts and attitude reached her words and actions. And, she wasn't a person who had a master's degree from Harvard or anything like that. But she had such a loving nature and was really spiritually powerful. And as I was saying, gave respect to everybody. So when you do that, people feel uplifted in your company. And that's, to me, a real leader is not so much what you know, it's who you are.
Yes.
And, I've had the fortune to meet lots of people over the years, in all fields, I suppose. But if you're asking about someone who really inspired through their leadership, it was Dadi Prakashmani. Dadi Prakashmani was the head of the Brahma Kumaris for a long, long time. And that's, it's the largest spiritual organization in the world run by women in all denominations.
It's profound.
It is.
Especially when, at a time, even now, especially if you see people in the media, the most people who talk about spirituality and leadership is mainly men. We've got a few exceptions, Sister Shivani being one, but very rare do we see women talking about spirituality, and it's a pity I missed meeting her, But
sometimes I feel there's so much upheaval and change in our world, isn't there? I think there's profound shifts happening in the power base of the world, and it's sort of a movement from maybe sort of the domination, I'm not saying by men, but a male sort of outlook and attitude. It's moving more, I think, towards female, from west to east, and from a very material sort of limited culture to a more spiritual and unlimited cultures. So there's these incredible shifts happening, and it makes the world a bit uncomfortable because we're not sure where we belong. Hence why people feel so stressed, because there's just so much change happening around us on every single level. And we feel insecure when change keeps threatening us, threatening our sense of identity. If my sense of identity is limited by all the labels of my body, I feel quite uncomfortable throughout this change. So often I dig my toes in, saying I don't want to change, or change is wrong.
Okay, let's now delve into your journey into Brahma Kumaris. So, what drew you to Brahma Kumaris in the first place and their teachings, and how did learning meditation specifically with them impact your life?
When I was in London, I used to go to a place in Hyde Park Corner called the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain.
Okay.
And when I used to go to talks, I was just always interested in, as I said, spirituality, even psychology. And there was a talk by two Brahma Kumaris sisters, Daddy Janki and Sister Jenti. And you know how it's not so much what people say, it's a feeling you get from people. As soon as I saw them, as I said earlier, my quest was how do you bridge that gap from knowing and believing all the theory to an experience. As soon as I saw their faces, I could see that they were experiencing. It wasn't just yet another belief system passing on. Yes, they were passing on ideas, but the ideas are the sort of doorway to spiritual experience. And I could see that in their faces. And I had tried meditation. So seeing that, it attracted me to go and learn. So I went to their centre in London, and almost immediately I found incredible new experiences. And I often love to call the mind like a laboratory, where you experiment with different thoughts and ideas to really extract a feeling. So when you have the knowledge of the self, ultimately when you extract the feeling of that truth, you have a quality of peace, almost like an inner stillness that feels like you've come home to where you really belong internally. And that's what I experienced. And even, as I said, I'd been an atheist.
Yes.
Then I was an agnostic.
Yes.
And so I was open, but in a way, if I can say this, I sort of, the idea of God that they offered was very logical for me. That I am a soul and God is also a soul, and there's a natural relationship. And when I experimented with that, I had such a incredible feeling of connectedness and love, like a quality of love. And that just attracted me to learn more and go deeper and practice more. So I feel that when you experience, you have a natural motivation to keep going, keep practicing. Because, when I first started, I realized I had so little control over my mind. In this world, we are so educated about the world outside, but so uneducated about the world inside. We have all these master's degrees and PhDs, but the mind's all over the place. And I really realized how little I had control over who I was, really. And I wanted to really discover more about myself. And it's just this amazing learning curve about me and who I am, and taking responsibility. If I feel unhappy, I feel burdened, it's not about another person, or it's actually about me. Because when you take that responsibility, you can change. When you project it onto people and situations, you're not going to change because you've given the power to them.
Yes.
And spirituality really is honest. It's about being honest deeply with yourself. Who am I? And let me take full responsibility for my life. It's more challenging, and it needs courage, and it needs a lot of self-honesty, but in the long term, you really step back into your true self.
How old were you then when you attended this conference?
22.
22. So you've gone from atheist to an agnostic, and at 22, a feeling came when you saw them, and then you went and explored further, I presume?
Yes, I did a meditation course in London. The whole thing just made a lot of sense to me, and so I began a daily practice, and I've continued it till this day. I love it, and I know it's not for everybody, and I fully appreciate that. But for me, I think I only feel really comfortable in my life when I'm sort of connected to my authentic self. I'm not trying to sort of be something that I'm not. And spirituality connects you to your authentic self, and even offers you a real relationship with God as well.
So from being agnostic to now believing in God, how long did it take after you did that course to say, yes,
I think it was
there is somebody
pretty
there?
quick, really.
Yeah.
It was pretty quick. The reason being because I was experiencing, You can't invalidate your own experience. It wasn't just faith. As I took the tools of the knowledge and experimented with them, unique experiences were emerging. And so,
Beautiful.
and I think what really sustains this spiritual journey is new experiences. The art of creating new feelings and tasting new experiences in the mind.
And so this teaching, what was it that set it apart from all the different monasteries and places that you had experienced while you traveled? What was it that suddenly was that shift? Apart from of course there was that feeling, but is there something else that...
Clarity.
Clarity.
It was absolute clarity. Who am I? I got such a definitive explanation of the soul, that I am a soul, and the soul is a wonder. The soul exists, but it has no size. It has no length, breadth, or width. It's incredible how subtle, because it's non-physical. And even to get your head around that, I've lived before this body, I live after, I always exist. And it was so clear how the soul enters the womb, how the soul acts through the body. At death, how the soul continues, enters the womb again. And what the soul is made up of. You have a conscious self that's connecting through the sense organs, but you have an unconscious self which carries your entire record of the past. And it just made a lot of sense to me, and there was so much clarity, even with God. You know, often we hear the word God and it means a different thing to every human being, but I was offered this idea that just as I am a soul, this micro point of consciousness, God is a soul too. But I'm a soul that takes, you know, does actions and reaps happiness and sorrow. God is a soul that never does that and is a conscious, living, real being. Just like I'm seeing you, you're a soul, but you're acting through your body. God is a soul without a body, so just as aware, just like I can see you reacting to me, responding to me, smiling, you're a conscious being acting. God is a soul but does not have sense organs. So how to have a relationship with that being, a real living being, and that, it just made a lot of sense to me, and it was both logical and spiritual at the same time.
I have a lot more questions on soul because for those that are listening, and I have a lot more questions on God. But just to follow the the order a little bit, just in terms of Brahma Kumari, a lot of people out there, because I've started meditating also with the Brahma Kumaris about a year ago, a lot of people ask me, especially the Indian ones, because they hear the name Kumari, Kumari being a female-centric name or an unmarried girl. They always, especially the guy friends of mine or acquaintances, they usually say, is it for men? So for the official record.
Well, I'm here.
You're here.
No, it is. But as I was saying earlier, I think there's a big shift in our world, and the Brahma Kumaris, quite frankly, when they started in India, didn't get that much regard because I think, you know, there's a strong tradition in all parts of the world, India included, of the male guru, the male teacher.
Yes.
And yet I would say that they've developed a huge amount of respect, but anyone can come. And one thing once I was attending a meeting here in Australia for the Australian Multicultural Association, and they had religious leaders and their communities. And everyone was talking about their communities. It was beautiful. But when it came to me, and it really dawned on me deeply, you know, I suppose the Buddhists were talking about their Buddhist community and the Christians, their Christian community. But I said, here there's Hindus and Buddhists and Muslims and Christians, and because we're a family of souls, actually.
Yes.
And that's something which is really lovely, that people from all backgrounds can come together and meditate. And I think those sort of limited identities, that I have this label and you have that label, so there's something between us which won't gel. But when I'm the soul and I see you as the soul, it's like a family, no matter what gender, religion, nationality, colour, belief system, profession, wealth. It's not a barrier. We're communicating on a much different level. And I love that deeply because actually when I was travelling, I really was quite pained to see how much conflict there was in the world just based on all these differences. And I even remember I used to write a diary, And in that diary, I had this idea that young people would renounce their religion and nationality for the benefit of the world. They just became like world citizens. And wherever there was trouble or need in the world, they would travel there to help. So that we go beyond the ego of I am this and you are that. So I am better and you are worse. That's a powerful consciousness in our world at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah, let's see if there's solutions out of this talk that we could come to. So the founder of Brahma Kumari, he named the terminology Brahma Kumari because he wanted females to be, forefront. And that was, from what I read, 1936. Yeah. What made him have that vision when women were, back in those days, not given as much regard as perhaps they are now in terms of equality?
I think, his vision was he saw that the qualities embodied in the female role in life of love, sustenance, care, nourishment was what human beings really needed. In the constitution of the Brahma Kumaris, it has to be headed by women. It has to be headed by women. And so, but men and women, of course, take part, and men also have responsibility in the organisation, but the actual heads have to be women. And I think it's sort of, when we look at the soul's not male or female, but we all have male qualities and female qualities. Perhaps the male quality is the power of action. The female quality is the power of virtue. And it seems that we need both.
Yes.
Whether you're in a male body or a female body, if I can use that terminology, we need both the virtue, the sweetness in my character, and also the ability to express that through action. Some of us have too much strength on one side or the other side. But we seem to live in a world where there's a lot of emptiness internally, and we do action to get love, to get respect, to get acknowledgement, whatever. And so we've become addicted to doing, sort of it's the real sort of male energy of life. But the nurturing inner energy is what human beings need at the moment.
It's beautiful. He also believed in the concept of simple living, high thinking, and had a vision for a better world. What was this concept, and what were those visions that he had?
Brahma Baba, as we called him, was known as, his name was dalailama. He was a jeweler, actually, and from a Sindhi background. And he was living between sort of Karachi and Calcutta in those days. And he was a very sort of spiritually minded person, but he had a business, but he served a lot of the Maharajas of India at that time. But his real passion was truth and the spiritual journey and connection with God. And he was getting to that point of retirement in life, and he just had this incredible vision of a world in massive upheaval. Massive upheaval. And to the point he was shocked. He had no idea the context of this vision.
Was it a dream?
No, it was a vision.
Vision, okay.
He was meditating. Then a few days later, he had a vision of these beautiful, radiant little points of light coming out of the sky into the foreheads of these absolutely divine beings, like deities, pure human beings that were just the embodiment of peace, love, and happiness. And even that, he didn't really have a context. But in time, he realized that we're at this incredible point of change, a world, in a sense, I would say that when the first relationship of life is so dysfunctional, the relationship of me with me is so unhealthy, when each of the 8 billion human beings has this unhealthy relationship, it pollutes my health, my relationships with others, my family life, everything. And that's the world in which we live. And in a way, we're moving back as the soul transforms back to its original state, which is in each human soul to be peaceful and loving, then we create the world we really want. And so the seed of what we see in this world is the consciousness of humanity. And when there's a false consciousness like now, then we create the culture of the world we see around us at the moment. And we keep putting patches on it and throwing trillions of dollars in this, but it doesn't change because our consciousness hasn't changed. We haven't really identified the seed of the problem is in all of us.
Right.
It's not just the leaders. All of us have this pollution of my ego, etc. within us. And until we begin to work on that and change that, the external expression of that won't change.
So the vision that he had of people becoming deities was us transforming ourselves.
Transforming ourselves, yeah.
To become a better person and get our intrinsic qualities that you mentioned, peace, love, joy.
Absolutely. And in a way he saw time moving in a cycle, that we're at the end of a cycle based on human consciousness because we've lost our spiritual power and we've forgotten who we are, we've forgotten the connection with the divine, hence the culture we've created. But when you re-spark the human soul again, the cycle starts to move back to a more peaceful and loving and happy world.
So what is this cycle that you talk about? Are we moving to, in Hindi we say Satyug, which is the golden age? Are we moving towards that?
I think so.
Yeah.
You wouldn't see it out there though at the moment.
No, there's a lot of wars and upheaval right now.
But really the cycle is something fascinating because, everything goes in cycles, the 4 seasons of the year, etc. But we're at the end of a period, as I say, of what we would call Kali Yuga, or the Iron Age, based on human consciousness.
Okay.
And this confluence period of change where when human souls reawaken their truth within themselves, live in a state of soul consciousness, take power from the divine to change themselves, we move back into the spring once again. So at the moment we're in the winter of human consciousness. And when you're in the winter, you feel it's never going to end, you're cold, it's bitter, it's miserable. But spring always comes, and we are going back to the human spring, but it only happens when I take the responsibility to transform myself, have the courage to not blame politicians, leaders, everyone else for the problems. We're all responsible, but take responsibility to make myself new in that way.
So do you think this change is happening in the next 100 years?
I do. And
or shorter period?
Yeah, I think much shorter.
Okay.
We can't really identify exactly how long. But, there's so many predictions in all religions and all traditions and even non-religions of a time of huge change. Change is both wonderful and scary at the same time. So that's what's sort of happening at the world at the moment. But quite frankly, Shikha, I find that one of the most challenging things in life today is just to see how life is so difficult for most, I'd say a majority of people. And, stress, I often think there's a crisis in the soul of humanity. And when that crisis bubbles to the surface, we put labels on it. Stress, tension, anxiety, depression, there's a whole lot of... But fundamentally it's describing this incredible dis-ease within the self, a discomfort. I want to feel peace and calm, but I feel really uncomfortable and often don't even like who I am, And if I don't like who I am, then that ricochets into so many... And that's the state, the human condition at the moment. And the whole vision of Brahma Baba was to create a university to study the human soul. So I study and I begin to observe that my original nature is clean, is pure, but as I forgot who I am, I became polluted, so to speak, spiritually. And I've got all these habits within me which give me and others around me sorrow. And when I start to just step onto this journey gently, pay attention, practice a spiritual practice, I start to heal. There's like this deep healing that happens in the core of my being. And that's really what the spiritual journey is, this just self-healing, daily practice. As you look after your family, as you go to work, as you live life, you're on this inner journey of taking responsibility, improving the quality of my thoughts and feelings and my attitude to other people too. But how can we do it? Where do we get the power? It's really the connection with God. And that's an amazing thing. It gives you a willpower, resilience to actually change. Because I think deep down most of us feel it's too difficult. To really, I want to change myself. I don't like my weaknesses.
Yes.
It's too hard. It's the too hard basket. You know?
Yes. Yeah. The corporate world, what we have learned through our very different case studies is there are something called disruptors. So Apple, they came in and changed the market. Netflix, for the OTT platform, it came and changed the media industry. And of course, we've got Uber, which came and changed the taxi industries. And these disruptors, they shifted the market in a good way. And now, with there's a lot of more people waking up, if I could coin the terminology in that way. And there are a lot of leaders, such as yourself, Sister Shivani, many other leaders that are coming into the forefront and helping us wake up. So do you agree with that? Do you think that we're in a spiritual evolution and there are something called spiritual disruptors through mediums like yourself?
I think so, in the sense that I once went to a retreat in the Brahma Kumaris, have a beautiful place in upstate New York, and a lot of management gurus of the world were there. And one of them was saying that is that all over the world these little groups are mushrooming in all cultures, all backgrounds, who want a completely different way. And in a way, a sort of a disruption to the culture, and I think it is a culture created by a body-conscious world, an ego-driven world. It has its own culture, but it's not satisfying anyone anymore. So when people start to live in a soul-conscious way, it's disrupting, but it's it's an incredibly positive change, I think. But as I said earlier, as we said, we're very resistant to change. Change is very threatening at the same time. We yearn for peace and love and happiness, but we fear changing our lifestyle or our way of life to prepare for that. So it's a sort of when two rivers meet, there's a lot of turbulence. The old culture is meeting the new culture. So some resist and some engage. But more and more people are engaging and, in a sense, disrupting their own pattern of life up to that point of time and prioritizing peace in their life. That rather than my job, my title, my role, my wealth, and all the superficial things of life, my peace of mind and my family's peace and my family's happiness is a priority. And in a way, that's a massive shift that is happening. It's a huge change in the world at the moment.
For me, it was also a very big shift when I first started meditating here. I didn't realize there was an identity beyond my little world and my classic thing. I was in a corporate world just doing, because it was an action-oriented thing. I was head of sales. I was told to perform, so it was like just a human doing. And I took that break consciously last year, wanting to be a, human being, because I just wanted to be. And what I found was really profound with this fact that I'm a spiritual being, because I had no idea. And it's still something that I'm coming to terms with, because it's still a whole new concept for me. So it's interesting that you mentioned that.